A Nightmare on Elm Street, Dreamspawn, Chapter 2. Jane stood in the corner of the gymnasium, wishing the glossy wooden floor would open up and mercifully swallow her. It was well into her second week at Hemingway High, and it just seemed to get worse and worse. She was dressed in her usual gym clothes, baggy black sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, silk screened with an Edward Gorey bat. Her feet were squeezed into ugly modern sneakers whose only virtue was that they were too black. Her long braids were coiled in a figure 8 at the nape of her neck, and her cheeks burned with thick, crimson heat. Physical education was always a humiliating nightmare for Jane. She was awkward and uncoordinated, and every exercise seemed deliberately designed to make her look fat and pathetic. Growing up, Jane's physical body always seemed like nothing more than a carrying case for her agile and active mind, and occasionally cantankerous but generally reliable life support system that got her from point A to point B, with minimal attention. Ever since puberty, her body began asserting itself, pestering her with ridiculously primitive longings and destroying the safe, neutral shape of her childish form, with an overabundance of feminine curves. When she was younger, she was often able to get out of gym because of childhood asthma, but she had since grown out of that lucky malady, and now she found herself subject to shameful and unspeakable horrors such as dodgeball and push-ups. The class was picking teams for basketball. Jane wondered if teachers had any clue that an ordeal the picking of teams always was for the less than the desirable students. Unsurprisingly, Jane's newfound nemesis, the ubiquitous Miss Dunn, was the captain of one team. A tall and athletic black girl with mannish shoulders and cornrowed hair was the opposing captain. There were only 2 students remaining to be chosen. One was a scrappy tomboy with ratty purple hair and Eurasian features, a strong, defiant chin and wide-set, golden hazel eyes with distinct epicanthic folds. She wore a black tank top that read Gorehound in large, drippy red letters, and her ensemble was completed with unevenly cut-off jeans, ugly children's knee socks covered with Halloween pumpkins, and battered black Converse felony flyers. The other unchosen student, of course, was Jane. "Lesbo, Lola, or the corpse fucker," Amber said, holding a finger to her chin in an exaggerated pantomime of thoughtfulness. What a choice," one of her acolytes said. "Geek and geeker." "Well, Kayla," the scrawny redhead said to the black girl in Amber's trio, drawing the first syllable out long and juicy. "We are all alive, so it's not like we have to worry about the corpse fucker trying to grab our boobs." "Yeah, right," the tomboy sneered. "Even if I wanted to, I'd need tweezers and a microscope to find your triple A's, Shane." "Fuck off, Lesbo." Miss Tanner, the gym leader, blew her whistle. She looked like a bitter, aging fitness model whose sculpted, leathery physique was clearly the only thing she had left to hold on to. Her thin, bleached hair was scraped up into a severe ponytail, and the corners of her mouth were turned down in a disapproving scowl. "Enough, ladies," she said. "Cole, you're with Mason, Dehan with Dunn. And Cole, I want proper athletic wear in my class from now on. No more cutoffs, is that understood?" The tomboy rolled her eyes and reluctantly went to join Mason's team. Jane stood frozen for what felt like a century. Just when it seemed that life couldn't possibly get worse, here she was, teamed up with the enemy. Unbelievable. Jane forced her feet to move her body across the gym to where the snickering cheerleaders stood in their hip, low-rise microfiber yoga pants and sporty, midriff-bearing tank tops that showed off toned and flawless abs. They all seemed sleek, athletic, and graceful, like escapees from a Super Bowl sneaker commercial. Jane felt like an albino hippopotamus trapped out of water and dumped in the midst of a herd of gazelles. Jane had only the most rudimentary understanding of this foolish game called basketball. Bounce the ball against the ground with one hand and try to throw it up into the basket. Jane knew she was in no danger of actually scoring any points, or even getting to bounce the ball at all, so she mostly tried to stay out of the way and avoid falling down while trotting from one basket to the other, following the rest of the girls and hoping to look involved enough not to fail the class. She couldn't help but notice the purple-haired tomboy across the court, barely moving faster than a stroll and making no effort whatsoever to participate. Jane caught her sullen gaze, and a cynical smile curled in one corner of the other girl's mouth. Distracted for a second by the brief, unexpected scrap of camaraderie, Jane did not see Kayla turn and throw the ball directly at Jane. "Heads up, CF!" she shouted. Jane turned towards the sound of the girl's voice just in time for the orange meteorite of the ball to slam into her face, knocking off her glasses and making her eyes water with shock and pain. Waves of laughter spread through the gym as Jane fell over, sprawling gracelessly on her ass. She landed on her glasses, feeling the delicate frames twist beneath her weight. "Sorry," Kayla said, making it clear with her facetious sing-song tone that she was not. Jane fumbled for her glasses and hooked them over ears with shaking hands. Sure enough, one lens was cracked, blurring her vision just enough to plant the seed of what would eventually become a bitch of a headache. "Dahan," Miss Tanner said, "will you kindly pay attention? Save the daydreaming for your own time." The bell rang then, and the herd broke apart, heading for the locker room. Miss Tanner gave Jane a contemptuous look and grabbed her arm, hauling her to her feet. "You're just not making any effort to be a part of the team," Miss Tanner said. "I won't stand for slackers in my class. Is that understood, Jane?" The teacher leaned in and raised her eyebrows, as if imparting critical wisdom. "Every pound over your ideal weight increases your risk of heart disease by 10%. You need to get on top of this weight problem now, while you are still young, or you'll live to regret it." Jane was speechless. She forced her head into something like a nod, burning with shame and humiliation. Her mind scrambled for some witty comeback, but nothing came. Miss Tanner gave Jane a last scornful once-over, and then turned away, leaving Jane standing there like a spanked child. "Are you okay?" a voice behind Jane asked. Jane turned to face the tomboy with the purple hair. Suspicious of anything but the expected contempt from other students in this scholastic hell, Jane frowned, squinting through her cracked glasses. "I'm fine," she muttered. "Well, you know what they say," the tomboy said. "Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger," Jane replied wearily. "I know that's supposed to be true, but when is it going to happen? I don't think I can wait much longer." That was by far the single longest conversation Jane had had with the fellow student since her arrival, and she wrapped her arms around herself, feeling uncomfortably shy all of a sudden. The tomboy laughed and shook her head. "Just one more year and we're out of this zoo," she said. "We better get changed or we'll be late for whatever soul-killing torment is coming up next period." Now it was Jane's turn to smile. "It's algebra," she said. "Shop," the tomboy replied. "See you around then," Jane said. "You bet," the tomboy said. "Oh, by the way, I'm Lola Cole, and I'm not a lesbian." "Well, I'm Jane Dahan, and I'm not a corpse fucker," Jane replied, smiling a little. "Not that I'd care if you were a lesbian." "Well, I wouldn't care if you fucked dead people," Lola said, smirking. "Though personally, I like making corpses better than making it with a corpse." Jane frowned, thrown. "What do you mean you like making corpses?" she asked. "You mean killing people?" "Geez, nothing like that," Lola replied. "I'm a special effects artist. I sculpt corpses and monsters and all kinds of fun stuff. When they let me out of this prison for the criminally hip, I'm moving to Hollywood to work in the film industry. You like horror movies?" "I mostly just read," Jane said. Lola nodded and shrugged. Jane seemed to have almost nothing in common with this brash punk rock tomboy, but yet she sensed a weird sort of outsider kinship between them that made her feel better than she had in weeks. Suddenly the bell rang a second time. "Ah, shit," Lola said. "Late again." She turned to run. "Catch you later, Jane Dahan." Jane smiled and waved. The locker room was deserted, so Jane took a chance and quickly skinned off her gym clothes, trying to spend as little time as possible exposed in her big, black granny panties and thick, functional bra. She pulled on her black pantyhose, long, gauzy skirt, and charcoal velvet tank top. She would never risk undressing in front of her classmates, but since she was so late and thus alone, she was able to change quickly and without having to lock herself in a bathroom stall. She had her Mary Janes on her feet, her red backpack on her shoulder, and her gym clothes stowed when she heard a soft, sliding footstep. Whirling to face the sound, she saw a little girl standing near the showers. Curious, she took a step closer. The child was about 7, pale and silent, in a faded pink nightgown. She held a little black dog in her arms, and the dog's body seemed limp and lifeless, lolling against her chest. There were a few specks of blood on the front of her nightgown. "Are you okay?" Jane asked. "What happened to your dog?" The child said nothing, but without warning she looked up and past Jane, gasping, eyes wide in terror. Jane whirled, adrenaline racing in her veins. There was no one behind her, and when she turned back, the girl was gone. Jane wasted several minutes searching the empty locker room, but there was no one there. That was the second time her imagination had gotten out of control in the school. Could it be stress from the constant bullying? She didn't know, but she was now nearly 10 minutes late for algebra, a class she actually liked, with a sympathetic, intelligent teacher. When she finally staggered into class, muttering apologies and sliding it into an empty desk, Mr. Fong frowned at her. Then she saw him register the crack in her glasses. Instead of scolding her, he nodded wordlessly and turned back to the board to continue writing out an equation. It was as if he could tell what had happened and understood. Mr. Fong was 5'3" at most, with thick glasses, bad skin, and a clipped Chinese accent. He dressed in an unchanging uniform of navy pants, a white short-sleeved button-up shirt, and one of 3 cheap, variously striped ties. Jane imagined he had gotten his glasses broken more than once back when he was in high school. After that class was over, Jane escaped out the side door, amazingly avoiding any further confrontation. Must be fellatio practice for the cheerleading squad, or something equally important, because her personal tormentors were nowhere to be found. When she made her way out around the front, she saw Lola off to the side of the crowd. She had changed clothes and was wearing awful green and orange plaid, old man pants pulled up to the knees, a t-shirt with the words "Fulci Lives" in red over a rough black and white zombie head, and clunky combat boots spattered with plaster and paint and a million other unidentifiable substances. She was idly popping a skateboard on and off the edge of the curb by the front steps, and when she saw Jane, she zipped over and then stepped hard on the tail of the board, causing it to flip up into her hands. The underside of the board was hand-painted with an impressively vile tableau of half-naked female zombies ripping apart a screaming man. "What up, Jane?" Lola said. "Need a lift?" Jane eyed the gory skateboard doubtfully. "On that?" Lola laughed. "No, silly, in my hot rod." She gestured towards a battered, primer-coated Dodge minivan. Its bumper was plastered with stickers of bands that Jane had never heard of, and horror movie monsters. "You have a car?" Jane asked, incredulous. "Where are you from, Mars?" Lola fished the keys from her pocket. "This is sunny Southern California, baby. It's illegal to be over 18 and not have a car." "I'm not from anywhere," Jane said. "I'm moved too often to claim loyalty to a single town." Lola looked curiously at Jane and then opened the passenger door. "Fair enough," Lola said, heading around and slipping behind the wheel. "You coming?" "Sure," Jane replied, hesitating for a moment before settling into the passenger seat. She had meant to decline the offer of a ride, but somehow there she was. Lola keyed the ignition and the little van rumbled like a tank, rowdy punk rock blaring from the crackly speakers. There was an air freshener shaped like a skull, some purple beads, and a big gory eyeball with long red roots hanging from the rearview mirror. The seats were covered in hideous lime green, zebra-striped fur, and the back was filled with junk, large white plastic buckets, jugs of artificial blood, old newspapers, tools, plastic tarps, and what looked like the front half of a rabid poodle, mounted on a 4-foot pole. In the center of the dashboard stood a kitschy, wobbling hula girl, only she had been repainted in dead, rotten green and gray, her little face slashed with open red wounds and one eye gouged out. "Sorry," Lola said, turning down the music. "I don't normally have riders." Jane smiled and shook her head. "So, where are you living now?" Lola asked. "On Tamarine Street, number 315, just off Hillcrest." "By the Vons?" Lola pulled out of the school lot. "You mean that huge supermarket, right?" Jane started to feel lighter as the hulking school building shrank away in the rearview mirror. Yeah, next to the car wash. That's right. No shit. That's like 3 minutes away from me. I'm behind the bowling alley on Vista. We're practically neighbors. Jane felt the strange wave of shyness again. Here was someone she could almost imagine being friends with. Someone who was an outsider like her. An ally in the hostile war zone of Hemingway. Yet she was almost afraid to take the chance, as if exposing herself to friendship was just asking to be hurt. It would be safer to keep everyone on the outside, to remain alone. But it would be so nice to talk to someone, to share a joke, an arched eyebrow, or a cynical comment. But before Jane could say anything else, they were suddenly in front of her latest house. Here you go, Lola said. Thanks, Jane said, shouldering her pack. I guess I'll see you Monday? Lola reached into the glove box and pulled out a business card, offering it to Jane. It had clearly been made on a home printer and said LCFX in scratchy red letters like knife cuts. But beneath that it read, Gore and Creature FX, Pretty and Ugly Makeup and more. And below that an address and a phone number. Give me a call if you're bored over the weekend, Lola said. You can come down to the shop and hang out. Sure, Jane said, slipping the card into her knapsack. Thanks. She stood there, watching Lola's minivan pull away and tear off down the quiet street. Her eye was drawn to a bumper sticker that said, Who will survive and what will be left of them? A weird, anxious shudder passed through her, but she shook it off, fished her keys from her knapsack, and let herself into the empty house. She stood in the cool hallway, feeling eternally grateful that her mom was not home to interrogate her about her new friend. Jane spent most of Saturday in her room, reading and puttering around, organizing things and putting up some of her framed death portraits. As she stood squinting in her spare glasses and holding a photograph of a pale, serene, deceased young lady sitting on a plush divan with a lifeless baby in her arms, Jane found herself thinking of Lola's comment about making corpses. She thought how cool it would be to get Lola to make her up like a corpse and photograph her in that old, soft-focused black and white. She wondered if Lola would appreciate her collection of death portraits, or if they were too stiff and old-fashioned, not gory enough. Smiling, Jane supposed Lola preferred her corpses to be shambling around and eating people's brains. Lola answered her phone in the first ring. LCFX, she said. Hi, Lola, it's Jane. Oh, hey, how's it going? Just getting settled over here. Jane looked down at the photo of the dead lady. Listen, what are you up to? Not a goddamn thing, Lola replied. I just finished the rough cut of my zombie dog movie and was sitting here thinking that it wasn't too late to look into that career in the food service industry. I'm sure it's brilliant, Jane said. It's visual Alpo, Lola said. I thought I was pushing the envelope, but now it just seems trite and childish. Like showing the kids in the lunchroom you chewed up food. I'm sure you're being too hard on yourself, Jane said. Maybe you should give it a rest for a few days and then come back to it with fresh eyes. Yeah, you're probably right, Lola sighed. Well, want to grab a burger? Sure. Jane wrapped the portrait of the woman and the baby back up in bubble wrap and slid it into her knapsack. I have something I want to show you. Jane met Lola in a faux 50s-style franchise diner called Daddy O's, next door to the Vista Lanes bowling alley. The decor was all standard issue, red and white checks on the floor, red vinyl booths and framed reproductions of ad art for Finn cars and discontinued products. The waitresses were dressed in sexy, pseudo-50s red and white uniforms, featuring each girl's name embroidered on the left breast. Their waitress was heavily tattooed and sporting weird, greasy, half-bleached Carol Brady hair. Her name was apparently Fifi. The girls gave Fifi their order, a cheeseburger with fries and a chocolate shake for Lola, and a turkey club sandwich and grape soda for Jane. While they waited, Jane took out the portrait and slid it across the table to Lola. Is this for real? Lola asked. Jane nodded. People took portraits of their dead loved ones to remind them of how they were in life. Just like in The Others! Lola brushed a finger over the dead infant's face beneath the glass. That is so cool! The what? You know, The Others. The ghost story with Nicole Kidman where she doesn't know she's dead. She finds a whole album of pictures like this. I guess I didn't see it, Jane said. You might like it, Lola said. Not much in the gore department, but a pretty cool story. The gore department? Jane smiled. Sounds like a bad comic book about cannibal FBI agents or something. Anyway, I have a pretty decent collection of death portraits at this point. It's just hard to collect anything when you have to keep moving. The glass gets all broken. She paused while Fifi clunked down with their drinks. Still, there's a kind of peaceful stillness in these portraits. They never change no matter where I go. Fifi frowned and hustled away as if they were contagious. Lola smiled. I'd love to see the rest of them sometime, she said, banging her straw against the tabletop to break it free from its paper sleeve. Sure, Jane replied. She looked down at the photograph. Do you think you could do a portrait like that of me? You know, as if I were dead? A big, genuine smile broke across Lola's face. Hell yeah, she said. No problem. I can even fake that old photograph look in Photoshop. It'd be great. Tomorrow? Jane sipped her soda. No time like the present, Lola replied. Jane sat in Lola's makeup chair with paper towels over the shoulders of her black, turn-of-the-century shirtwaist. She wore a tiny veiled hat featuring a pair of real stuffed hummingbirds and a long, rustling skirt that was modern but passable. She watched with silent awe in the paint-spattered mirror, while Lola used sprongs and brushes to still the bloom from her cheeks and shadow her eyes until they seemed sunken in her head. It was quite disconcerting to see herself as a corpse. Lola's shop was in the huge four-car garage of her parents' sprawling, ramshackle house. Lola's mother was Malaysian, a sculptor who gave pottery classes, and her father a burly blonde American, the owner of a small hardware store. Their house was filled with strange, vaguely sexual yet non-representational clay sculptures, and seemed in a state of perpetually incomplete home improvement. Lola's world was completely self-contained and unconnected to the main house. She had a loft bed and an ancient and ugly orange sofa in front of a big-screen TV with a stack of interconnected VCRs, a satellite scrambler, and multi-region DVD players. Horror movie posters plastered the wall between functional metal shelves packed with strange and horrible things. Monster heads and severed limbs, jars filled with eyes, a pile of tongues, a full-sized human corpse with its insides hollowed out hung from the rafters like a gutted deer. Several frighteningly realistic zombie poodles in various degrees of injury and decomposition. There was a massive blood and latex splattered work table, a deep glass front commercial fridge, a large stove, and bulky industrial sink, but curiously no bathroom. That was apparently the only reason Lola would ever have to leave her little sanctuary. I don't know why Amber Dunn and the cheerleading hit squad have it out for you the way they do, Lola said, dabbing purple shadows beneath Jane's cheekbones. I mean, they've been after me since the dawn of time for all the obvious reasons. I've had my locker plastered with girl porn, had nail polish poured into my backpack, been locked in the art supply closet, the works. But now they just can't seem to get enough of you. Jane shrugged, and Lola scolded her not to move. I don't know, Jane said, trying to speak while barely moving her lips. Geek pheromones, maybe? I get that sort of thing all the time, no matter where I go. I'm starting to feel like a permanent outsider. Yeah, well, someone needs to put those bitches in their place and teach them a lesson. Lola brushed fine white powder over Jane's face. You're done. Jane stood and let Lola lead her to the prepared backdrop, an antique chair nabbed from the main house and set against a smooth dove-gray-colored screen. That would be great, but how would we do it? Jane asked, sitting in the chair and arranging her skirts. Lola adjusted her lights and hefted her camera. It's not impossible, Lola said. You need to hit them where they live. Turn the shame and humiliation back on them. Jane sat up primly in the chair and closed her eyes, imagining herself stiff and cold. I don't know, Jane said between flashes. It's like hunting lions. What if you miss? Actually, I have a plan, Lola said. It's a good one, too. The thing is, I need someone to help me. I can't do it alone. Really? Jane frowned. What is it? Lola held up a finger, slipped away behind the set, and returned with an actual stuffed tabby cat. She set the deceased feline on Jane's lap, Its stiff, dusty bulk felt strange against her legs. Lola snapped a few more shots. "Why?" Lola asked. "You in?" Jane held the dead cat and felt a cold excitement creeping through her belly. A chance to get back at her tormentors, to make them feel what she felt every day, was just too delicious to pass up. Revenge for all the humiliation of all the geek girls in all the world. "Tell me," Jane said. Chapter 3. "Are you sure about this?" Jane asked, standing by the van door with her arms wrapped around her body. They had been over and over their plan during the week after Lola shot Jane's death portrait, and they both had every move planned down to the second, but Jane still felt agonizingly nervous. Lola grinned and gave her the thumbs up. "Come on, man," she replied. "Don't whip out on me now." She held up both hands in curled G-shapes. "Geek girls are go." Jane reluctantly raised her own fists like G's and tapped her knuckles to Lola's. "Geek girls are go," she repeated, a mite tremulously. Across the street was the Dunn house, a big, expensive Spanish-like villa. It was infested with teenagers like a hedge with whiteflies. Bass-heavy music rattled the windows in their frames, and the lovely Mediterranean garden was littered with beer cans and passed-out students. Grating, hysterical laughter clashed with waves of primate-like hooting, and the occasional liquid gush of copious vomiting. Jane was utterly horrified. It was as if everything she hated most in the world had been condensed down into a single location. "Where are her parents?" Jane asked. "France, Acapulco, Timbuktu," Lola shrugged. "Who knows?" "And you're sure they'll be gone for 2 weeks?" Lola nodded. "At least," she said. Amber is the textbook definition of a latchkey kid. Her jet-set parents had a baby because it was trendy at the time. And now that she's not a puppy anymore, it's a miracle if they remember to leave bowls of food and water for her when they leave town. Her parties are legendary for total lack of adult supervision. Cocky as always, Lola bowled her way across the yard and elbowed through the crowd around the open door, hauling Jane in her wake. It was easily 10 degrees hotter inside the house and packed with sweating teenage bodies. It was as if the poor house was sick and feverish with this horrible parasitic infection. Everywhere Jane looked, she saw some thoughtless atrocity perpetrated against the house. Cigarettes were being ground into the lovely imported tile. Half-empty beer bottles drooled their warm contents across the tasteful Spanish leather sofa. All around her were distorted, drunken faces and meaningless, empty conversations. She fantasized idly about poisoning the keg with a nice strong dose of anti-human penicillin to kill off the infection and save the house. They continued through the crowded rooms and hallways like Dante and Virgil traveling through the levels of hell. A crimson-faced young man lay draped across the top of a piano, while his compatriots stuffed a tube into his gaping mouth and poured alcohol into a funnel at the other end. A wobby blonde girl in 2 high designer heels scooched along a hallway, with her cheek pressed against the wall as if it was the only thing holding her upright. They found a small, inexplicable scattering of tiny female underwear, G-strings, so skimpy they might have been mistaken for eye patches, littered across the carpet beside an empty bottle of champagne. They followed a long, dim corridor to a candlelit bedroom suite, filled with amorous couples struggling to get as close to actual penetration as possible, while still remaining mostly clothed. "Where's Amber?" Lola said over the music into the ear of a grinning jock lounging against the doorway. The jock pointed to a closed door at the far end of the room and then raised his fist to his mouth, poking his tongue into his cheek in imitation of fellatio. Lola rolled her eyes and shook her head. Jane followed Lola as she threaded her way around the grinding bodies. A thick, slurry female voice spoke up from somewhere under a muscular male body. "Hey," it said, "it's Lesbo Lola. This is a straight party. No lesbos allowed." Drunken giggles from the girls and several male heads rose up, with inevitable Pavlovian interest at the word lesbo. When they finally reached the indicated door, it was opened by a staggering senior with his zipper down and a dumb grin on his face. He slapped Lola on the back. "She's all yours, lesbo." Jane arched a brow at Lola, silently telling her to stay cool. Lola nodded in response to Jane's unspoken command, and together they pushed open the door and entered the darkened bathroom beyond. They found Amber slouched on the closed toilet, cheek resting against the toilet paper roll. Her shirt was off, and her heavily padded pink bra had been pushed up beneath her chin. Lipstick and drool were smeared across her face, and she was snoring softly. Jane closed the bathroom door and slid home the lock. "Amber," Lola said, poking her arm. "Amber, wake up. It's time to go now." Amber made a vague, cranky noise and swatted at Lola's hand as if it were a fly. "She's trashed, all right," Jane said, lifting a mascara-smudged eyelid and looking into Amber's rolled-up eye. "Let's do it," Lola replied. "Get her shirt and her purse." Jane found Amber's Prada purse and slung it over her own shoulder, then located Amber's crumpled pink sweater and wrestled her into it while Lola pushed open the single window in the room and looked out into the yard below. "Well, the coast is clear," Lola said. She and Jane each took one of Amber's arms, hauling the cheerleader to her feet. She weighed next to nothing, but the dead weight was still awkward as they muscled her over to the window. Jane leaned Amber into Lola's arms and climbed out through the window, slipping down into the backyard. Jane took a quick glance around the yard to make sure they were unobserved, and then motioned for Lola to hand Amber over. Lola struggled to stick first one of Amber's tanned and perfect legs out the window, and then the other. One of her expensive high-heeled shoes slipped off and hit Jane in the forehead. She cursed silently and grabbed Amber's sweaty thighs, pulling while Lola pushed. When the cheerleader's full, unconscious weight hit Jane, she tumbled backwards across the grass with Amber sprawling on top of her. Lola was down in a heartbeat, grabbing Amber under the arms and motioning for Jane to get up and grab her feet. Jane found herself thinking of 100 stories where the protagonists are obliged to dispose of a body. The authors always made it seem so easy. Walking awkwardly backwards as quickly as she could, Jane let Lola steer as they carried Amber down the path and through the back gate, out into the street and around to Lola's van. Leaning Amber across the hood of the van, Lola fumbled for her keys and unlocked the sliding rear door. "You can forget it, Joey," Amber mumbled inexplicably and then puked up a stream of thin, fiercely alcoholic vomit down over the bumper. "Jesus," Lola said. "If she pukes in my car, I really am going to kill her." "Come on," Jane said, grabbing the lolling Amber off the hood. Together they bundled her into the back seat, slammed the door, and then jumped in the front. Lola stomped on the gas and they sped away, laughing. When they got near Lola's house, they drove with the lights off, turning off the engine and coasting soundlessly into the driveway. All the lights in the neighboring houses were out, and there was no one on the sleepy suburban street, for as far as they could see. Moving quickly and silently, they carried Amber across the driveway and over to the garage door. "You have no fucking idea," Amber muttered into Jane's shoulder, while Lola unlocked the door. "You don't have a clue." Jane flinched at the sound of her voice, flushed with paranoia and looking over her shoulder to be sure there was no one there. They hustled Amber into Lola's workshop and shut the door, bolting it securely behind them. "Okay," Lola said as they draped Amber across her work table. "You get her laid out flat and put the swim cap on her head and straws in her nostrils. I'll start mixing the alginate." "In her nostrils? You're kidding, right?" Jane looked doubtfully at the two jauntily striped straws. "You think she's going to lay still for that?" Lola smirked, dumping white powder into a plastic bucket and mixing in water with her hands. "Won't be the first time someone stuck something in her while she was unconscious. Now hurry up before this stuff starts to set." Jane laughed and picked up one of the straws. Holding Amber's head still, she stuck the straw up into the unconscious girl's nostril. No response. She added the second straw and covered Amber's mouth. Amber was breathing smoothly and evenly through the straws, face untroubled and out cold. Jane gathered Amber's sweat-damp blonde hair up in a knot on the top of her head and yanked the tight latex cap over the girl's head. "Okay," Jane said. "Okay," Lola repeated. "Here goes nothing." She hoisted the bucket up onto the table and began to quickly slop the slick white paste all over Amber's face. The unconscious cheerleader lay cooperatively still as the entire front of her head was covered. "Timer," Lola said. 15 minutes, Jane replied, setting the timer. Lola rinsed her hands. "I can't believe this is working," Jane said, laughing. We're not there yet, Lola warned. She could freak out at any moment. Time ticked excruciatingly slowly, and nothing happened. Jane held her hands under the straws to feel the warm flutter of Amber's breath. Lola tapped the rubbery white shell that had formed over Amber's face and checked the timer again. When the 15 minutes finally passed, she peeled the life cast up, revealing a perfect reverse of Amber's sleeping face inside. It worked, Jane said. Hot damn, Lola replied. We're in business. What now? Lola smiled. Principal photography, she said. Together they lifted Amber off the table and carried her to the set that they had constructed earlier. A simple setup, just a single metal folding chair against a blue plastic tarp background. They set Amber in the chair and Jane pulled the swim cap off her head and tied her down with quick, sloppy knots, while Lola set up her video camera on a tripod. She motioned Jane out of the frame and hit record. Silently, the two girls slipped into their costumes. Black fatigue pants, long-sleeved black shirts, black gloves, boots, and black ski masks. When they were both dressed, they entered the set from either side. Jane grabbed Amber by the hair and lifted her head, while Lola slapped her face until she came to a groggy semi-consciousness. "What the hell?" she muttered, struggling against the ropes. "Are you crazy?" "We're making a movie," Lola said, "and you're the star." A movie?" Amber grinned. "I'm the star?" "That's right," Lola pointed to the camera. "You're the star, and we're the bad guys." "You're the bad guys," Amber repeated like a parrot, deteriorating into giggles. "Now listen," Lola said. "The heroine, that's you, has been kidnapped. Just struggle and scream and act real scared, okay?" "Okay," Amber said, and her head dropped back down on her chin. "Christ, wake up, will ya?" Lola pinched the underside of Amber's arm. "Ow!" Amber squealed. "That hurt, you fucker." "Much better," Lola said. "Ready? Action!" Lola grabbed the camera off the tripod and shot some footage of Amber's bound and struggling body. Then she looked up at Jane and nodded. Jane hefted a machete and poked the tip of the blade under Amber's chin. "How about I slice all that skin off your pretty face, bitch?" she said. Jane had to stifle a sudden urge to giggle. Never in a million years would she ever have dreamed of saying something like that to anyone, but it just sort of popped out. She was surprised by how good it felt. "Oh my God," Amber said, blubbering fearfully. She actually wasn't a bad actress, even bombed. "Oh my God, please, please don't hurt me. Please, oh my God." Lola zoomed in on Amber's crying face as a bubble of snot swelled in her nostril. "Scream," Jane said, pressing the ridiculously huge knife harder against Amber's throat. "Huh?" "I said scream." Lola walked over with the camera still in her hands and pinched Amber again, even harder, and she let out a perfect horror movie scream. "Beautiful," Lola said. "A couple more just like that, and it's a wrap." "You heard her," Jane said. "Scream again." Amber let fly with a volley of sobbing screams, winding down into a coughing fit. "Don't you puke again," Lola warned. "Please," Amber begged, slushy, drunken words sounding nicely beaten and terrified. "Please let me go. Please. I won't tell anybody about the abortion. It's like it never happened." Jane and Lola exchanged quizzical looks, and Amber dissolved into sobs and then passed out again. A knock on the garage door nearly sent the two girls right out of their skins. "Lola?" the high-pitched, breathy voice of Lola's mother called. "Honey, keep it down in there, will you? It's late." Lola clapped her hand over her mouth to stifle giggles before she called out, "Sorry, Mom. We're just shooting another scene for the movie." "Okay," Lola's mother said, "but wrap it up soon, all right? The neighbors are still mad about that zombie thing you did last month when you put the corn syrup all over their dog." 10 more minutes, Mom," Lola said, pulling a piece of duct tape off the roll and slapping it over Amber's mouth. Lola shot some more footage of Amber struggling and crying with the tape on her mouth, and then some nice close-ups of her bloodshot, mascara-streaked eyes. "And that's a cut," Lola said with a grin, switching off the camera. "And that's a motherfucking wrap." "Great," Jane said. Let me get a couple of digital pictures, Lola said, for continuity. She snapped several shots of the bound girl, including close-ups of her ruined makeup. Got it, Lola said. Go ahead and let her loose. Jane pulled the tape off Amber's mouth and began to untie her. That was great, Amber, she said. You're going to be a big star. That's right, Amber said. When Jane started to undress Amber, the cheerleader got wild and belligerent, swinging loose, ragdoll fists. I'm not making a porno, she hollered. You can't make me. Shit, Jane said, fighting to hold Amber down and looking to Lola in frustration. We're not filming you now, Amber. Lola put the camera on the table, pointing the other way, and lifted both hands in the air. See? We just need to get you into your next costume. Well, why didn't you say so? Amber relaxed in Jane's arms. Am I a pirate? Jane and Lola burst out laughing. Yeah, Lola said, pulling off Amber's sweater and bra and slipping a Black Flag t-shirt over her head. A punk rock pirate. Jane gathered up Amber's clothing and jewelry in a plastic bag while Lola slid a pair of faded camouflage pants over the cheerleader's hips and slipped her feet into plastic flip-flops that were a size and a half too small. Avast, Amber said, spraying Lola with alcoholic spit. Prepare to be swashbuckled. Yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum, Lola replied, hauling the transformed Amber to her feet. It's funny, Jane said, smiling a little. She looks almost human. Don't let the outfit fool you, Lola said. She's still the most vicious bitch in school. I can't drink rum, Amber said. It's totally like fattening. They each grabbed an arm, and between them they hustled Amber back out to the van. Jane sat with her in the back seat while Lola drove. Within minutes, Amber had deteriorated into sobs again. I'm hungry, she wailed. I want a Snickers. We'll get you one later, okay? Jane said. Nobody likes me, Amber said. They say they like me because they want to be me or stick it in me, but they don't really like me. Jane reached out and patted Amber's shoulder, feeling a sudden wash of inexplicable pity for the drunken cheerleader. We like you, Jane said. Speak for yourself, Lola muttered. You do? Amber threw her arms around Jane. You're my only friend. Sure, we're your friends, Lola said, winking at Jane in the rearview mirror. That's why we're going to help you now. You're going to help me? That's right, Lola said, pulling into the parking lot of the New Dawn Substance Abuse Clinic. Are you sure they'll take her like this? Jane asked, trying not to watch while Amber doubled over and fertilized the roses by the clinic door. I called ahead, Lola said. As long as we can get her to sign the paperwork, she's in. She called over to the vomiting Amber. You want to stop drinking, don't you, Amber? In response, Amber turned away and puked again. I'll take that as a yes. They helped Amber through the doors and into the clinic's lobby. It was downscale and rough, not all the kind of cushy, plush day spa Amber's rich parents would have chosen to dry out their daughter. Peeling yellow paint, scuffed brown linoleum, brown plastic connected chairs that looked donated after 10 years at the airport. There was a long, high counter with sliding bulletproof glass. Behind the glass was a very tough-looking black woman with close-cropped hair and a New Dawn t-shirt. Can I help y'all? She asked, arching an eyebrow. Our friend is an alcoholic, Lola said. She wants to stop drinking. Is that right? The woman looked down at Amber, and the drunken girl started crying again. I hate my life, she sobbed. I don't want to be like this anymore. Well, I'll need her insurance card, the woman said. Some ID, and she'll need to sign this release. She handed Lola a clipboard, and Jane set Amber down, going through her purse to find her driver's license and insurance card. Sign here, Amber, Lola said, putting the cheap chewed pen in Amber's hand. Amber scrawled a wild, loopy scribble about a half an inch above the signature line, and Lola handed the clipboard back to the woman behind the counter. So, how long will it be before she can make phone calls? Lola asked. She'll be in detox for 2 weeks, the woman replied. There can be no contact with the outside world during that time. Jane and Lola exchanged a look, each biting their lip not to laugh. The woman pushed a button under the desk, and a huge bearded guy in orderly scrubs came out into the waiting room. "Are you ready to go?" he asked Amber, in a surprisingly loud voice. Amber turned back to Jane and Lola with a panicked look on her face. "It's okay, Amber," Jane said. "You'll be just fine." Amber flung her arms around Jane. "I love you," she said. "You're my only friend." "Okay, that's enough now, Amber," the guy said, unwrapping Amber's arms from around Jane's neck. "It's time to go. You'll be able to see your friends again when you are out of detox, okay?" "Okay," Amber said. She looked so tiny and helpless as the giant led her away, and again Jane felt a stab of sympathy. Lola mock punched her in the arm. "Let's go, Mother Teresa," Lola said. Jane nodded and let Lola lead her away. Okay, this has been chapters 2 and 3 of A Nightmare on Elm Street Dreamspawn. Yes, I know there was no Freddy here, but we did get to see another little vision that Jane is having. You know, first the TV that had Freddy laughing and the car broke through the glass, and now she saw the little girl with the dead dog. Is she seeing herself as a little girl, or is a little girl from the prologue a different girl than Jane? I don't know, but we are in California. We're not in Springwood, so I'm wondering where this story's going. The reviews were right, there is a lot of character development, and we are only on page 73 right now. Some of the reviews said that Freddy didn't pop up for 100 pages or so, some said even longer than that. But I do like the characters. I do love the fact that this book is actually taking the time to have character development at all. If you remember Suffer the Children, it was just like a generic, cliche teenage Freddy movie. I mean, each of the characters, you didn't really care about them, you didn't know much about them. You know, they were just like cut and paste characters from any slasher movie. I do like Jane and Lola, and I feel like Amber even has more depth to her than we've seen so far. And I feel like she'll play a bigger role later in the book. Perhaps I'm wrong, we'll find out. Anyways, I'll be back tomorrow with a couple more chapters. Guys, be sure to check out the trailer for the new Jason fan film that's coming out next year called Voorhees. I put a link to the trailer down below in the description. Also, if you're into creepypasta narrations, there's a great new narrator on YouTube who I think has criminally low sub count right now. His channel name is Lighthouse Horror. If you go to my YouTube channel page, he is in my featured channels. Check it out, give it a listen. If you're into creepypastas, I think you'll really enjoy his channel. Alright guys, until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and pleasant dreams!